I was staring at the hospital ceiling, the fluorescent lights humming like a persistent headache, while the man I promised to spend my life with checked his reflection in the room's tiny mirror. I was 4 centimeters dilated. Every breath felt like a battle I was losing, and Mike was adjusting the collar of his Hawaiian shirt. "The Uber is 5 minutes out, Savannah," he said. His voice was casual, too casual, like he was heading to the grocery store instead of a terminal at JFK. "The guys are already at the gate. If I miss this flight, I lose the deposit on the villa. You understand, right?" I didn't understand. I couldn't. Another wave of pain hit, a jagged, white-hot serrated edge slicing through my abdomen, and I squeezed the bed rail until my knuckles turned white. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him that our son was coming 3 weeks early and that I was terrified, but all I could manage was a strained whisper. "Mike, please stay." He didn't even look at me, he looked at his watch. "The doctors said first labors take forever. I'll be back in 4 days. You'll probably still be in recovery anyway. My mom is coming over. You're in good hands." Then, with a quick clinical peck on my forehead that felt more like a goodbye to a distant relative than a wife in labor, he grabbed his carry-on and walked out. He didn't look back, not once. The silence that followed his exit was louder than the monitor's beep. It was the sound of a 10-year relationship shattering on the cold linoleum floor. I was Savannah Miller, a woman who had spent a decade building a life with a man who just chose a Cabo margarita over his firstborn child. Let's be clear, this wasn't a sudden lapse in judgment. As I lay there, the epidural finally numbing my legs but sharpening my mind, the anatomy of our marriage began to deconstruct itself. Mike had always been the protagonist of his own life. I was just the supporting actress, the one who managed the bills, the one who curated his social image, and the one who made sure his boys' trips were packed and ready. I had been blind, not because I was stupid, but because I was loyal. But loyalty has a breaking point. And mine just walked out of room 402. By the time the sun started to peek through the blinds of the maternity ward, the world had changed. At 6:14 a.m., I held my son, Leo, for the first time. He was perfect, tiny, fragile, and utterly dependent on me. As I looked at his small fingers, a cold, hard resolve began to settle in my chest. It wasn't just adrenaline, it was a realization. Mike hadn't just left me, he had abandoned Leo. I picked up my phone, no missed calls, no "did the baby come?" texts. Instead, I opened Instagram. There it was. A story posted 20 minutes ago. Mike and 3 of his friends holding up beers on a sunny balcony overlooking the ocean. The caption read, "Much needed R&R, sorry for the FOMO, boys." He wasn't sorry. He was celebratory. My hands weren't shaking anymore. In fact, they were steadier than they had been in years. I looked at Leo, then at the image of his father laughing 300 miles away, and I realized that the man who left for vacation wasn't the same man who was going to come back to this house. Because the woman waiting for him wouldn't be his wife anymore. She would be his reckoning. I called my brother, a high-end estate attorney with a mean streak and a very long memory. "Hey Ben," I said, my voice eerily calm as I watched the nurse check Leo's vitals. "I need you to do me a favor. We need to move some things, and by things I mean everything." The anatomy of revenge isn't about a sudden explosion. It's about the slow, deliberate removal of the foundation until the whole structure collapses. Mike wanted a vacation? Fine. I was going to make sure that by the time he landed back in New York, he'd have nowhere to go and nothing to his name but that Hawaiian shirt. Ben arrived at the hospital 2 hours later, not with flowers, but with a legal pad and a look in his eyes that told me he was already visualizing the courtroom battle. My brother has always been a shark, but seeing his sister abandoned in a maternity ward had turned him into something much more dangerous. "He actually left, Sav?" Ben asked, his voice low, glancing at little Leo sleeping in the plastic bassinet. "He didn't just leave, Ben, he justified it," I replied. I felt a strange sense of clarity. The physical pain of childbirth was fading, replaced by a cold, calculating adrenaline. "He thinks he's coming back to a grateful wife and a newborn in a nursery he didn't help build. I want to make sure that doesn't happen." We spent the next 3 hours deconstructing our shared life. Because I had been the one managing the finances, the reliable one, I knew exactly where every thread of our existence was woven. The house in the suburbs? The down payment had come from my inheritance, and the deed was in both our names, but the mortgage payments had come exclusively from my salary while Mike invested his earnings into crypto and gear for his hobbies. We start with the house, Ben said, scribbling notes. Since there's a history of financial abandonment and now physical abandonment during a medical crisis, I can file for an emergency restraining order and temporary exclusive occupancy of the residence. He won't even be allowed on the sidewalk, let alone through the front door. But I wanted more than just a locked door. I wanted the anatomy of his comfort to be dismantled. While the nurses moved softly in the hallway, I began the digital purge. I logged into our shared cloud storage. 10 years of memories, sure, but also the records of his business expenses that were actually bar tabs and golf trips. I backed everything up to a private drive. Then I changed the passwords, all of them. The Netflix account he used, the Amazon Prime he leaned on, and most importantly, the smart home security system. I sat there in that hospital bed, nursing my son with one arm and systematically deleting Mike's access to our life with the other. By noon the next day, Ben had his paralegal serving papers, not to Mike, who was currently posting a video of a jet ski race, but to Mike's mother. I knew she'd call him. I wanted her too. I wanted the seeds of panic to be planted while he was still 300 miles away, helpless to stop the momentum of my exit. Sure enough, my phone began to vibrate on the tray table. Mike incoming call, I didn't answer. I let it go to voicemail. Then came the texts. Savannah, my mom just called me crying. What do you mean I'm being served? Is this some kind of joke? I told you I'd be back Sunday. I waited 10 minutes before typing a single sentence back. Focus on your tan, Mike. The locks have already been changed. I blocked his number. The next step was the physical transition. I called my two best friends, Mia and Chloe. They didn't ask questions, they just asked for the key code. While I was recovering in the hospital, they were at the house. They weren't just packing his things, they were performing a surgical removal. Every trophy he'd won in high school, every expensive pair of sneakers he'd bought instead of paying the electric bill, and every piece of tech he prized was packed into boxes and moved to a climate-controlled storage unit. But I didn't stop there. Mike's pride and joy was his home office, a room filled with high-end gaming rigs and specialized photography equipment. I had paid for 60% of it as birthday gifts. Sell the equipment, I told Mia over the phone. Use the money to hire the best deep cleaning service in the state. I want every cent of him scrubbed out of that carpet. I want the house to smell like he never existed. As the second night in the hospital fell, I felt a weight lifting. In the US, we're taught that marriage is a partnership, a 50-50 split of soul and effort. But Mike had been playing a different game. He'd been a ghost in our responsibilities and a king in our luxuries. I looked at the out-of-office auto-reply I had just set for his personal email account, which I still had access to. It now read, I am currently away on a vacation I prioritized over my family. For all inquiries regarding my whereabouts or my future, please contact my wife's attorney. I leaned back against the pillows, closing my eyes. The first stage was set. The foundation was gone. Now all I had to do was wait for the plane to land. Sunday afternoon arrived with a heavy, humid New York heat. I was back home, not that Mike would know it. The house was quiet, smelling of lemon verbena and fresh paint. My mother-in-law, Brenda, had been ringing the doorbell for an hour, but thanks to the new Ring camera and the restraining order Ben had drafted, she was just a silent, frustrated figure on my phone screen. Then the notification I'd been waiting for popped up, movement detected at front door. I watched the live feed. A silver taxi pulled up to the curb. Mike hopped out looking tan, relaxed, and wearing a new Cabo Life t-shirt. He looked like a man without a care in the world until he tried to put his key in the lock. He jiggled it. He frowned. He tried again, harder this time. Then he began to pound on the wood. Savannah, open the door. My key isn't working? I didn't move from the sofa. I held Leo closer, feeling the steady heartbeat of a child whose father thought a beach trip was more important than his birth. I pressed the intercom button on my phone. "You're at the wrong house, Mike." My voice echoed through the external speaker, calm and detached. He jumped, startled by the voice coming from the wall. "Sav, stop the games, I'm exhausted. My flight was delayed and I just want to lie down." "Open up, you don't live here anymore," I said. "The emergency filing for exclusive occupancy was granted yesterday. Your things are at the U-Haul storage on 5th, Unit 402. The first month is paid for. After that, it's on you." Mike's face went from tanned to a sickly shade of gray. "You can't do that, this is my house, I pay for—" "You pay for the internet and your car insurance, Mike," I interrupted. "I pay the mortgage. I paid the taxes. And I have the bank statements to prove that you've been funneling household money into your personal leisure for 3 years. My lawyer calls that financial dissipation. I call it theft." Brenda chose that moment to storm up the driveway from where she'd been lurking by her car. "Savannah, you're being hysterical. He made a mistake, but he's the father of your child. You can't leave him on the street." "He left me in a hospital bed, Brenda," I shot back through the speaker. "He left his son in a plastic bassinet because he didn't want to lose a deposit. Now he can deal with the deposit on his storage unit. Move away from the door, or the silent alarm I already triggered will bring the police here in about 3 minutes." The look of pure, unadulterated shock on Mike's face was the most honest emotion I'd seen from him in a decade. He wasn't sad he'd missed the birth. He wasn't worried about me. He was terrified of the inconvenience. He was looking at his neighbors who were now peeking through their blinds at the man locked out of his own life. "Savannah, please," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "I have no money. I spent the last of my savings on the jet ski rentals and the villa. I don't even have a place to stay tonight." "Maybe your boys have a couch," I said. "Or maybe you can check back into that villa. But you're not coming in here. Every time you look at that Cabo Life shirt, I want you to remember it was the most expensive piece of clothing you ever bought. It cost you a family." I disconnected the call. 10 minutes later, flashing blue and red lights reflected off the hallway walls. I didn't even look out the window. I heard the muffled voices of the officers, the screeching protest of Brenda, and finally, the sound of a car driving away. The silence that followed was different than the silence in the hospital. This wasn't the silence of abandonment. This was the silence of a clean slate. I looked down at Leo. He was awake now, staring up at me with dark, curious eyes. "It's just us, kiddo," I whispered. "And honestly, we're going to be just fine." But I knew Mike wouldn't disappear that easily. A man like that, a man who feels entitled to everything and responsible for nothing, always tries to find a way back in. He didn't realize that I hadn't just changed the locks. I was about to dismantle his entire reputation in the one place he valued it most, the public eye. By Monday morning, Mike had shifted from pleading to posturing. He couldn't handle the reality of being a homeless father in the eyes of our social circle, so he did what he always did. He tried to control the narrative. I was sitting in the nursery nursing Leo when my phone started blowing up. Mike had posted a long, rambling status on Facebook and Instagram. He'd used a photo of us from 2 years ago, back when I still looked at him with stars in my eyes. The caption was a masterpiece of manipulation. "I'm heartbroken. I came home from a pre-planned work-related trip to find my wife has locked me out of our home and is keeping my newborn son from me. I made a mistake with the timing, but I'm a father who just wants to hold his boy. Please keep us in your prayers during this mental health crisis Savannah is going through." The comments were already pouring in. "Stay strong, Mike. Postpartum can be so hard on families. Praying for Savannah's healing." He was painting me as the crazy hormonal wife to cover up his own cowardice. It was a classic move. In the anatomy of a betrayal, the betrayer always tries to make the victim look unstable. But Mike forgot one crucial detail. I had the receipts and I had the passwords. I didn't argue in the comments. I didn't call him names. Instead, I waited until Tuesday morning, prime scrolling time for our entire hometown. I posted a single carousel on my own profile. The first slide was a photo of the Cabo Life shirt Mike was wearing in his jet ski videos, time-stamped exactly 4 hours after Leo was born. The second slide was a screenshot of his text to me. The doctors said first labors take forever. I'll be back in 4 days. If I miss this flight, I lose the deposit. The third slide was a photo of the discharge papers from the hospital, showing I left the building alone with a car seat and a diaper bag while he was checking into a luxury villa. I captioned it, "Accountability isn't a mental health crisis. It's the consequence of choosing a vacation over your child's birth. Leo is doing great, and his father is welcome to see him once he passes a court-ordered fitness evaluation and pays the 3 months of back utilities he forgot to cover while funding his Cabo trip. Truth isn't a crisis, it's a baseline." The shift in the comments was instantaneous. The prayers for Mike turned into shame on you within minutes. His work trip lie was dismantled in front of his boss, his parents, and his boys. But the real surgical strike was happening behind the scenes. Ben had discovered that Mike hadn't just been investing his salary in crypto. He had opened a line of credit in my name, using a forged signature to fund his lifestyle over the last 6 months. "This is identity theft, Sav," Ben told me over the phone. "We could go to the police, or we can use it as leverage to make sure he signs over his remaining equity in the house and waives any claim to your retirement accounts." "I want the equity," I said. "And I want him to sign a notarized admission of the debt. I don't want him in jail, I want him in debt to me for the rest of his life. I want him to feel the weight of every dollar he stole from our future." That afternoon, Mike showed up at Ben's office. He wasn't wearing the Hawaiian shirt anymore. He looked disheveled, frantic. The public shaming had hit his ego hard, but the threat of a felony charge for credit card fraud had finally broken his spirit. He called me from Ben's conference room. "Savannah, please," he sobbed. "You're destroying me. I'll lose my job if the fraud charges go through. I'll lose everything." "You already lost everything, Mike," I said, my voice steady. "The moment you walked out of that hospital room, you signed the paperwork for your own downfall. Now you're just deciding if you want to sign the divorce papers voluntarily or if you want to do it from a precinct." He signed. He signed everything. He gave up the house, the car, and any claim to the savings I had built. He was left with his storage unit and a massive debt that he would be paying back to me for the next decade. As I hung up, I felt a strange sense of peace. The anatomy of revenge isn't about hurting someone for the sake of it. It's about making the world right again. It's about ensuring that the person who broke the foundation is the one who has to sleep in the rubble. But there was one final piece of the puzzle. Mike's mother, Brenda, still thought she could guilt-trip her way into my nursery, and she was about to find out that being an enabler has its own price. The final confrontation didn't happen in a courtroom or a dark alley. It happened on my front porch, 2 weeks after the locks were changed. Brenda, Mike's mother, showed up with a box of heirloom baby clothes and a face full of manufactured grief. "Savannah, honey," she started, her voice trembling with that practiced fragility. "I know Mike was selfish, I know he made a mistake, but you're being so cold, you're stripping him of his dignity. How is he supposed to be a father if he has nothing? Think of Leo, he needs his father's side of the family." I looked at her, really looked at her. For years, I had excused her enabling behavior. I had ignored how she laughed off his little trips and how she told me to just be patient when he wouldn't help with the chores. "Dignity is earned, Brenda," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "It's not something I can strip away if it was never there to begin with. And as for Leo needs a mother who is mentally and financially stable, and he needs a family that doesn't prioritize a Mexican vacation over his safety." I pulled a small envelope from my pocket. It wasn't a lawsuit, it was a bill. "This is the list of the credit card charges Mike made under my name," I said, handing it to her. "Including the $2,000 he spent on a jewelry gift for you last Christmas that I ended up paying for. If you want to talk about family values, start by paying me back for your own necklace. If I see you on my property again without a scheduled visitation through the court app, I'll add your name to the restraining order." Mike is an adult. If he's on the street, it's because he built that street himself. Brenda's mouth hung open. The sweet grandmother act evaporated, replaced by a look of sheer bitterness. She turned around and walked away without the heirloom box. I didn't care. I left it on the sidewalk. 3 months later, my life looked nothing like the one I had planned, and yet it was exactly what I needed. Mike was living in a studio apartment above a noisy bar, working 2 jobs just to cover his legal fees and the debt repayments he owed me. He had supervised visitation for 2 hours every other Saturday at a public park. He showed up once, looked at Leo for 10 minutes, spent the rest of the time checking his phone, and didn't show up again. He didn't want a son. He wanted a prop for his social media. And without the house, the money, and the perfect wife to maintain the illusion, the prop wasn't worth the effort to him. The anatomy of our marriage had been a structure built on a lie. It was a house made of cards that I had spent a decade trying to hold together against the wind. When I finally let go, the cards fell, but I was still standing. I'm sitting on my back deck now. The sun is setting over the yard I now own 100%. Leo is sleeping in his carrier next to me. The silence isn't heavy anymore, it's peaceful. Sometimes people ask me if I feel guilty. They ask if I went too far by taking the house and exposing him. I just smile and think about that fluorescent-lit hospital room. I think about the man in the Hawaiian shirt who didn't look back. In the real world, forgiveness doesn't mean letting someone keep the things they stole from you. True justice is the anatomy of accountability. It's making sure that when someone chooses themselves over everyone else, they eventually find themselves completely alone. I'm Savannah Miller. I didn't just survive an abandonment, I orchestrated a rebirth. And as I look at my son, I know he'll grow up knowing exactly what a strong foundation looks like. Because it wasn't built by his father's promises, it was built by his mother's resolve.